Good day, everybody. Today, we are here to discuss another approach in comparative politics, that is the institutional approach. The objective of this lesson would be to know about the institutional approach, to know about the traditional approaches, to know what is an institution and how an institution becomes a political actor, how institutions are always in a state of flux, and to know the difference between the structural approach, structural function approach, and the institutional approach. Now, there have been traditional approaches which have talked about values and talked about how society ought to be. There are many traditional approaches. We can count the historical approach, the legal approach. All these approaches can be classified in the traditional approaches. The institutional approach is one of the traditional approaches in political science. The traditional approaches believe in the goodness of man. They believe in the goodness of the society. The traditional approaches advocate values and the implementation. They believe in the eternal ideas of rationality, happiness, thinking about the other person, not thinking about one's petty interests, and the traditional approaches are dominated by history, philosophy, and law. Society should move towards a certain set of ideas. They advocate what a society ought to be. They advocate what a good society ought to be and how we can move towards that ideal. The traditional approaches there are various meanings of traditional approach and the institutions. In political science, when we talk about institutions, we are talking about formal political institutions. The biomedical viewpoint is taking data from the hospitals, analyzing it and reaching some conclusion. When we talk about education, it is talking about analysis of various school boards, the university results, analyzing them and reaching a conclusion. When we talk about sociology, we study about the evolution of various institutions, how they have evolved over a period of time, and why the institutions are what they are. The question is, what is an institution? We have to first understand what is an institution, we have to understand its meaning, and then we can understand the institutional approach. An institution is a formal organization. It has an hierarchy. You have posts, you have people at various posts, and the hierarchy is well established, well respected, and the institution performs according to a definite set of rules. Of course, the rules can be molded a little with the change of time, circumstances, but more or less, the institution follows a set of established rules, and there's a hierarchy. You have a boss, then you have people lower to him, and the files move in a certain direction. Orders are given in a certain way. Decisions are taken after discussion, deliberation, and taking all the rules in mind. The members interact on the basis of special particular roles, as I've already told you, that because there's a hierarchy, every member has a position. He occupies a chair. The chair has certain privileges. It has certain limitations. So we can say the institution has public status. It is recognized by the constitution, by the political system, by the people. From the side of the people, there is respect. Why? Because the institution is a formal organization, and members perform their roles within an organization. They interact with each other. Rules are framed. rules are passed, decisions are taken. After the due process of decision making, the process of decision making is very, very challenging. It is very interesting. It is very informative. It is very progressive. And then the rules come out of a formal organization, which is called an institution. Now, according to Rod Haig and Martin Harrop, they say an institution is an organ of the government which is mandated by the constitution of the country. Now, the constitution of a country is a holy book according to which the political system is run. The government, the opposition, the various political parties have to adhere to the writ, to the orders, to the mandate given by the constitution. So, an institution is a formal body which is recognized by the government. And what is the institutional approach? It is a set of established institutions. Institutional approach studies the formal institutions or organs of government, studying them minutely, studying the institutions minutely, analyzing their actions, analyzing the decision-making process undertaken by the various institutions. Now, all this is studied under the institutional approach as to what is the role of the formal institutions in a political system, how effective are they, how detached are they from each other, how attached are they to each other, what is their manner of working, how do they influence the political system negatively or positively, do they work in tandem with each other or are they always in conflict with each other? Are the institutional approach studies whether the institutions are really effective or as an authoritarian or a totalitarian government, are they just puppets in the hands of some other body? So all this is studied in the institutional approach. Now, which are the formal institutions of government? Well, they are the legislature, executive, and the judiciary. Now, the institutional approach studies their mutual relations, as I have already told you. It also studies their functions, comparing them with each other as to how they are similar or they are different. Now, the institutional approach also studies minutely, analyzing them, their functions, comparing them, and it also studies if their actions are similar, why are they similar, and if they are different, why are they different. So, the institutional approach studies the formal institutions of power, that is the legislature, executive and judiciary, in great detail, analyzing them, dissecting them to an extent to understand how they affect the political system of a country and how they are in turn influenced by the political system of the country in which they operate. Now, institutions are set of agencies or offices, as I've told you before, and I'm telling this because this point is very important. In an institution, hierarchy is very, very important, and each office has its own set of powers or rules within which it has to operate. It has to operate within those limitations, and the institutional approach studies what is the role of the individuals in the institutions who occupy important positions or who are in the institution. So, the institutional approach studies the institutions along with the roles which the various individuals play while occupying any office, any chair within that institution. Now, sometimes there can be instability in the political institutions. The reasons can be many. One of the most important reasons or the causes which we see around us in many countries is when a charismatic leader who emerges over a period of time, or it can be an abrupt rise also, when a leader, a charismatic leader, becomes bigger than the institutions, then that leader tries to control the institutions. There is a lot of instability. It is not healthy for a democracy for a leader to emerge or to rise and become bigger than the institution, but it has happened in the past, and these formal institutions then go into the pockets of the leader. So there is instability then, and sometimes the instability in the political institutions or unhealthy competition or a break of mutual relationship between these institutions leads to a rise of a set of leaders who overshadow the institutions and overpower them to become leaders in their own right. So at some times, this unhealthy trend is also seen, which is again studied in the institutional approach. Then such leaders, to advance their own interests, try to control these organizations. Now, what are the features of institutional approach? It studies, the approach endeavors to study the powers of the various institutions. The institutional approach also studies the rules of the various institutions. All the institutions are formed because they help to satisfy the various needs of the human society. So, because the institutions are very, very important in fulfilling the interests of the people whom they protect, for whom they frame laws, for whom they run the political system efficiently, the institutions become larger than life, very important, very crucial for the political system. So, the institutional approach studies the working of all these institutions. Every institution has its own history. Every institution has its own past. So, the institutional approach studies the norms of the institution. It studies the past of the institution, the functioning of the institution in the past, present, and how it will act in the near future. Institutions evolve over a passage of time. They throw away whatever is obsolete, whatever is redundant, and they imbibe the new, because each country has a new generation coming up, which has its own aspirations, which has its own needs, it has its own expectations. So an institution has to evolve to satisfy the new generation, every new generation which takes birth, studies in that political system, become voters. That generation, they become voters, then they become very crucial as citizens of the country. They start participating. So every institution has to be in tandem with the generation. Otherwise, the generation would take it as a redundant institution and keep it aside. So an institution has to evolve to keep in step with the ever-changing needs of a generation after every 10 years, after every 15 years. So the institutional approach studies the behavior of institutions, how the institution is evolving, how they are adjusting themselves with the changing times, and studies the framework which is taken, which is adopted for the decision making process and ultimately the decisions. Institutions are very important political entity. They maintain stability in a political system. They predict the course of events. If they cannot predict the course of events, they play a very important role in paving the future for the respective political system. It is an organization in which positions of the people are very, very important, because people are the political actors and the institutions also take up the role of political actors. And these actors, the institutions, go on to make policies, which have Herculean effect in the long run. Institutions, besides framing laws, framing policies, have a lot of other roles to play. They recruit staff for the institution, for their own working. Then they mold the staff to act in a certain way of the institutions. They help their members grow within the institution, with the institution, and they teach the staff these certain internal procedures which make them acceptable to the external actors, that is the other institutions and the people of the political system. The main advocates of the institutional approach are Harold Lasky, Walter Bagott, James Price, and Bentley. These advocates are the ones, these political scientists are the ones who have given due emphasis and due importance to the institutional approach. Institutions are taken as superstructures. They are mobile, they are flexible. If they are rigid, there are chances of their breakdown, their non-acceptability by the people of the political system. They can have short-term as well as long-term influence on the political system, not only of the political system, of the respective political system, but of the political systems, but on the political systems around the political system in which they are operating. The institutions modify the behavior of individuals. They give options or they give choices to the people to behave in a certain way. They make rules for the people, and in the process they lead to sometimes overwhelming changes in the political system. The formal political institutions are those which are mentioned in the Constitution, which have an organization, which have a set of rules, and the informal are your customs, your traditions, your habits, etc. Now, institutions have a legal identity because they have the stamp of the Constitution, they are well organized, they have a public status, and under the institutional approach, we study only these institutions which are specified in the Constitution. Political institutions are studied as to how they govern the society. They are studied in a way, what is the distribution of authority, how does the institution use force, how does it use coercion to its own advantage. The institutions are studied in relation to the other political units as well as to the other political systems. Institutions affect and shape the behavior of human beings in the social, economic and political field. Institutions are the result of a lot of changes, but it is the institutions which are the cause of the growth of development of the society also. It is the institution which pushes and pulls the society, the economic system to the future by making very effective laws, implementing them and seeing to it that the laws are properly implemented. So it is the institutions which herald in lot of changes which take the society from one level to the other level. That is why a very famous sociologist, Emily Durkheim, has called the institutions as scaffolding of the society. Institutions are the structures on which the bricks for future progress, future growth are kept, and the society moves from one level of growth to another higher level of growth, and this all is done by the institutions. This all growth, the rate of growth, the experience of growth, all is taken care of by the institutions. An institution can be set up for the larger section of a society, or it can be set up for a particular section of the society. The main point is that it is within these institutions that decisions are taken. It is these institutions which shape the behavior of people. It is because of these institutions that people stick together, they work together, and they work together because they know it is through the institutions that a consensus will be formed, a decision will be taken after due process of law, after the due process of discussion and deliberation, and it will help them to reach at some conclusion which will be benefit for all the members. So the institutional approach also studies the institution as well as the behavior of its members, because the members play a very, very important role. Now, it is the political institutions which stop the arbitrary exercise of power by the permanent executive as well as the political executive. The permanent executive over here means the bureaucrats who are trained for a definite office, who have this specialization, who are there till they retire. That is the permanent executive who help in framing the laws. The political executive are our representatives whom we elect, our politicians, in lay language, the politicians who are there to formally introduce a law, a policy, and then convert it into a law in the parliament or whatever is the law-making body of that political system. In India, it is the parliament. In United Kingdom, it's the parliament. In Japan, it is the Diet. In United States of America, it is the Congress. So whatever law-making body, whichever legislature is there, it is the political bosses, the political executive, which can exercise their power arbitrarily. But it is the institutions which exercise a control on the bureaucrats and the politicians, on the permanent executive as well as the political executive, so that they do not cross their limits and they make the laws within certain parameters. Now, it is the institution which distributes property rights. It is the institution which decides the state power and the powers with the private hands. So everything moves according to the rules set up by an institution which is given to it by the constitution of the country. So the institutions do not let the political executive or the permanent executive ignore the masses, and the institutions help the people to ask or to make the political executive accountable to the people. It is the people who can ask questions because they know that the institution gives the political bosses only certain rights, only certain privileges. Now, the institutional approach, as all the traditional approaches, has been criticized for being non-scientific, for ignoring the individual, placing too much emphasis on the institutions themselves, and like the traditional approaches, this approach is also described is also criticized for being too descriptive and being normative. They say that there has been too much emphasis on the study of institutions by ignoring or at the cost of the individual. And there are other approaches in comparative politics which say that the individual is very, very important because it is the individual who occupies the chair. The chair is not so important. It is the chair or the political office or the institution has a certain set of rules, and it is the individual who can mold those rules, who can subvert those rules, or who can use the rules to his or her advantage to make the institution stronger or weaker. So the institutional approach is considered to be very static, not dynamic at all, an approach which does not study the role of the individual who occupies the chair. Now, this trend of studying the individual and pushing the description of institutions to the back burner came during the behavioral revolution, which said that we have to make political science more scientific. There should be less role of values, less emphasis on values. Rather, the behavioralists wanted to study the individual in all his glory, in all as a complete entity. So, from the 1960s, when the behavioral revolution started in the United States of America, there was less emphasis on the study of description of formal institutions, and there was more emphasis on studying the actors, that is the individuals. We can summarize by saying that the institutional approach studies formal institutions. It also studies those institutions which have less secure constitutional basis, like the bureaucracy, the political parties, etc. So, we can conclude by saying that despite the criticism which says that the institutional approach is very idealistic, very static, we can say that the institutional approach holds its own ground because it talks about an idealistic situation. It studies about the formal organizations of power, formal organizations of government, that is the formal institutions, the legislature, executive, judiciary, which have their own do's and don'ts, which have their own rules, which take decisions in a certain way, and they study what, as all the traditional approaches, they emphasize more on what ought to be than what is. But the institutional approach emphasizes on the study of institutions as a very, very effective formal organization of power. But the only drawback is there is little connection, or there is a break between theory and research. But nevertheless, we can say that for many, many years, the institutional approach was studied with great elan. It was studied to understand the institutions which are one of the foundation stones of any political system.